remember that you need to watch this video in its entirety so that you can answer the questions on the quick check coming at the end of this lesson. This lesson is about the Ohio Executive Branch. Featured here on the slide, we can see Mike DeWine, current governor of Ohio. So remember that in the Constitution, the original Constitution, Ohio's original Constitution in 1803, we see a lot of changes in the office of governor from 1803 to today's current version. So the Ohio General Assembly used to be the one to appoint officials in the executive branch. So, roles like the Ohio Secretary of State, the Ohio Auditor, the Ohio Recorder, those used to all be appointed by the Ohio General Assembly. Now, those officials are elected directly by voters on Election Day. So we're going to view who serves in those roles on a later slide. The governor also used to not be able to veto laws passed by the Ohio General Assembly. Now the governor can veto laws and even has a line item veto. So on spending bills, the governor can go through and cross out sections of laws that they do not want to sign. So they can sign parts of the laws. It's like editing power. So currently, our governor is Mike DeWine. In Ohio, the governor heads up the executive branch. This is the same for all states in the country. The governor was a pretty weak office that really didn't have much power, but as the history of Ohio has progressed, the governor's office has gained more and more power. So as I said, our current governor is Mike DeWine. He is a Republican, and the current lieutenant governor is Jim Tressel, also a Republican. Jim Tressel is a fairly new lieutenant governor. Up until last year, we had Jon Husted. Jon Husted was the lieutenant governor for most of Mike DeWine's 2 terms, but last year he was appointed to the United States Senate, filling a vacancy there, and then Governor DeWine got to pick his replacement, and he picked former Ohio State coach Jim Tressel. So the office of governor is very similar to the office of president, but on this slide we're going to talk about in the ways that they are different, okay? So in the state of Ohio, most executive officials are elected by voters, whereas the president actually gets to appoint those officials. So the United States Secretary of State is appointed by the president. The United States Attorney General is appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Whereas in Ohio, they are elected. Okay? Governors have less power over their branch because they don't get to appoint as many of those officials as the president does on their end. Because the president can appoint those officials, it means that they can fire them. Okay, remember the power to hire is the power to fire. Okay, and the president is the head executive for the entire country, whereas the governor is the head of executive branch for the state of Ohio. So the office of governor, they are considered the head of the state. So they have a role that if there are other governors or representatives of the federal government that are coming to your state, generally the governor is going to receive them, okay? Anytime the president comes to Ohio, generally Mike DeWine is going to go and receive him, welcome him to the state, if you will. Other roles of the office of governor is that they serve as a check on the legislative branch. They can veto bills. They also are there to enforce the laws of the state of Ohio. They are also the head of the National Guard. So the National Guard is a kind of like a military branch just for Ohio, okay? But honestly, they don't do much military work. What their real role is to help out in emergencies throughout the state. So, for example, we just had a huge snowstorm, and the National Guard, if people needed rescuing from their homes because they had been snowed in, it would be the National Guard that would go and help those people. When we've had historic flooding in certain areas of the state, again, it's the National Guard that goes to help rescue people from their homes with boats and such. Okay, that is generally the role of the National Guard. In the past, they have been deployed overseas. Famously, they were sent to Afghanistan and Iraq in the early 2000s. And that was just in an effort so that the country didn't have to enact the draft. But generally, the National Guard is supposed to be in the state of Ohio helping with emergencies. The governor also serves as a check on the judicial branch because they have the power of pardoning. Okay, so the governor can pardon people that were convicted of state crimes. So typically we see things like murders and assault, those kinds of things. Those are all state crimes, and so the governor can pardon those. Okay. Our current elected officials. So currently, our Ohio Attorney General is a man by the name of Dave Yost. He is a Republican. Our current Secretary of State is Frank LaRose, also a Republican. Remember, the Secretary of State in Ohio runs elections, okay? The Treasurer is a man by the name of Robert Sprague, and the Auditor is a man by the name of Keith Faber. All four of these men are Republicans. Even though they are not appointed by Governor DeWine, they do all belong to the same political party. So I want to talk a little bit about the growing power of the executive branch in Ohio. Remember, the 1803 Constitution did not give very many powers to the office. In 1851, when we get our new Constitution, it gave them a little more, but there were no term limits. But they had short 2-year terms. Currently today, the governor serves 4-year terms, and there are term limits of 2. The real power came from those constitutional amendments that were passed in the early 1900s. Okay, so now the governor has veto power, and also they get to set the budget, even though the budget is approved by the General Assembly. Whoops. And then in 1954, now we get our current 4-year terms with a 2-term limit, okay? Which is why Governor DeWine is not running for re-election, because he is currently almost at the end of his second